what do you think is the biggest mistakes that dealers make when they're trying to train their people, especially in F&I?
Number one mistake that dealers make is not freaking doing it. And I have this conversation weekly with dealers, and you start, you go into a dealership, have these conversations, and you're like, hey, really we need to look at, possibly, training, Jacob. Well, they just don't want to spend the money, which is fine if you have somebody like, I understand somebody like me, but you have, a company like I am that will come in and actually sit down and do it. But I can tell you the post-COVID, COVID really made a lot of people on this side of the business very lazy, right?
Well, hey, welcome back to this next episode of the Dealership Fixit Podcast. I am your host. My name is Jacob Berry, and today I got Gene Silas. He's the Vice President of Sales at Brightline Dealer Advisors. He's an industry expert, and what we are going to talk about today is the process, is the profit for sales, F&I, and reassurance. So, Gene, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. And I use that expert kind of loosely. You never know,
I got you, man.
There you go.
All right. So, Gene, let's kind of start at the beginning where we usually start these podcasts.
Okay.
You've got a real deep background in F&I and dealership operations, but your story starts at the good old Marine Corps. And it ends with you helping powersports and auto dealers transform kind of how they think about their finance process and people. Can you kind of take us back to the beginning and walk us through your beginning, your journey?
Well, absolutely. So I come out of the Marine Corps, and, like a lot of guys, what I did in the Marines, there really wasn't a civilian application for. So what do? So I worked in a factory for a year and, pretty quickly realized that was not the life that I wanted. And, just fell into the car business, honestly. And as I got into it, and it was a job, that I took because I wanted something different. About a year in, I realized this is going to be a career. And so I looked at it from a completely different angle. And once I focused on it as a career and became a student of the business, it's just, and I'm still a student of the business 33 years later. I just don't know that anybody's, completely got this thing figured out yet. So I'm always learning and, trying to figure out, what's the best way to do this? What's the best way to deliver value? And honestly, something I think we all should be looking at every day is, how do I deliver value for myself to the customer, from a dealership to the customer, which is something we have to look at. So that's a very short explanation of what you asked me. But, through the years, I just educated myself on every aspect of it. I'm a believer that you're either, you're green and growing or you're ripe and rotten. And too many times, especially the guys that have been doing this as long as I have, they tend to get very settled in the way they do things and not really open-minded to the new technology, the new products coming on, just whatever. And I can tell you, if you're not open right now, because I think the next 5 years, especially with the AI's been around for a while. It's just become a buzzword recently. But as this thing continues to develop out the next 5 years, it's going to be very formative, for powersports, car dealerships, every aspect of sales.
Totally. So, yeah. Walk us through the first career move there. Which dealership, what part of the country, what kind of lines were you selling?
Well, like I said, I was working in a fiberglass mill. Okay. I'm about to age myself. All right. So I looked around one day and I realized, what? There's people been here 20 plus years that are making the same thing I am that look like they're 190 friggin' years old. It's just, work. So I picked up a newspaper and started reading through it. And there was a lady in Augusta, Georgia, looking for a salesman for a Toyota dealership. So I was like, I love cars. So I put on my best t-shirt I had because, bro, I'm just a poor kid from trailer park. So I put on the best t-shirt I had, my best jeans, and I went and applied, and they hired me. And the reason they hired me is at the time, I didn't know that track this stuff. At the time, the car business was absolutely horrible. No one was applying for car sales jobs. I was the only one that applied to go to work, which is why they hired me. So they said, hey, you just got to buy a little nicer shirt and stuff, which I did. And I went in, it was, again, it was the best move I ever made. God directed us, I think, and that's just one of those, good directions and great organization to start with. And I just learned a lot. And I had really, I've been very blessed in my career. I've had very good mentors that I've learned from as I've gone through, from the retail days even until today. So hopefully at some point somebody will say that about me. But, as I got into it and started selling, after about a year in, I was like, this is truly going to be a career. So I started focusing on it. And then I transitioned into F&I just as a fluke. The F&I manager that was in the stores at the time decided to embezzle a bunch of money, and which is very common, unfortunately. So I told the dealer, I said, look, I think I can do this F&I thing. And said, hey, you know what, you're going there for a while until I hire somebody. Well, when I went in, and back then we were just selling real service contracts, life and disability, and gap. There wasn't all the products we have now. So first month, I ran right at $1,500 a car with just those products. And they said, you know what, you're the F&I manager. But talking about training and support, which is a big, big thing we do, this was literally my training, Jacob. I never will forget it. Walking to the office, Gene, that's your computer right there. If you look behind the desk, those are all your forms, your phone with all your banks. You'll have a customer in about an hour. So let's be ready to go. Every bit of training that I had there.
Yeah.
Go get it, and that's how I started. I just remember but I didn't know any different. I remember as I got, into it, thinking, man, there's got to be a better way of training than this.
Absolutely.
So the first real, what I consider to be a true trainer who ended up becoming a mentor was a gentleman named Jim Ziegler, rest his soul, who just passed away not long ago. And Jim was the first guy that I saw that would come in, train, and then sit beside you and actually do deals right beside you. Up until that, everybody was textbook or, come sit in the class, give me your money, leave. He was the first guy to actually come into the stores and do it.
Yeah.
And that's really where I've kind of formed, how I do it today. 'Cause I'm just a big believer, man. If you can't sit beside an employee or whoever you're training, desk a deal, do F9 a deal, write a service ticket up, get the salesperson to go through a demo, then, that's not the right person to have in your stores personally, but that's just my opinion.
That's so funny that you say that. I had a similar experience with my car dealership before my powersports days, where I was upgraded from the showroom floor sales guy to the BDC manager, which is just a glorified term for, hey, you get all of the incoming phone calls and the digital leads from the website. And we always used to have to make a bunch of outbound calls. I'm sure you had to do the same back in the day when we were selling, but the GM comes in one day. I'm the newly minted BDC manager. He throws down a bunch of papers on my desk and he says, start calling. And I say, okay, great. Well, who are these people? It doesn't matter. Just start calling, get them in. I'll close them when you get them in. And I go, well, what do you want me to say? And what are we going to talk about? And he's like, I just get them in. I'll take care of them. Just start calling right now. I need 100 phone calls from you today. And I had a similar kind of enlightenment where I go, you know what, if I ever get to a point where I'm going to be training somebody to do what I was just told to do, I'm going to sit there with them. I'm going to train them. I'm going to go through the process with them. So that stuck with me kind of in the same way. That's so funny.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm not a one-upper at all, so don't take it away, but how I started selling, and again, I'm really aging myself. The sales manager handed me a phone book.
Yeah.
Phone book, and said,
white pages.
Wife asked, just start calling. I remember thinking, calling for what? Now you fast forward to that. My son, I put in the business. I actually did not want him to get in the business, but he wore me down. He got in the business about a year ago, and he'll sell 25 plus cars a month. He takes 0 lot ups, and the only thing I showed him was the basics that I knew on the internet leads and actually going out and creating your own economy, whether Facebook Marketplace, TikToks, or whatever. And that's where he sells all of his vehicles, from. So you take that and put that into perspective from the phone book to where we're at now. Really, the mindset's almost the same. You're reaching out. It's just the technology is so much, better. You can target it. And that's the direction that it's going. If your people don't understand how to create their own business, then, surviving, trying to survive on lot traffic or The customers coming in, that's a short-lived deal. I rode by a store the other day. There were 4 salesmen just sitting outside on a bench. I'm thinking, why in the world, first of all, would you do that? Secondly, if you're a manager or a dealer, why would you let your people be out there and not helping them drive and teach them how to do business? Anyway, I digress. That kind of shit just drives me batty, when I see that,
You got to fill your pipeline.
I think it's a failure on the dealership's part, though. I mean, either they're not training or they're just not providing, the customers to come in, the ups come in.
Well, that's a great segue into kind of our first topic here, right? From classroom to showroom. You've actually said it before that a monkey can train in a classroom, but it takes a real pro to sit side by side and deliver what they teach. What do you think is the biggest mistakes that dealers make when they're trying to train their people, especially in F&I?
Well, I can tell you the biggest mistake that dealers make, and that's actually a very, very good question. The number one mistake that dealers make is not freaking doing it. And I have this conversation weekly with dealers, and you start, you go into a dealership, have these conversations, and you're like, hey, really, we need to look at, possibly, training, Jacob. Well, they just don't want to spend the money, which is fine if you have somebody like, I understand somebody like me, but you have, a company like I am that will come in and actually sit down and do it. But I can tell you the post-COVID, COVID really made a lot of people on this side of the business very lazy, right? But post-COVID, now we're getting back to what it was years ago, which is delivering the value and the training and the development in the stores. So if you don't have that aspect, you're going to have to send your people out to be trained. And if you do that, it's going to cost you some money. That's the first mistake they make. Second mistake they make is not holding people accountable to the training they have received. So if I go in and I'm teaching Jacob how to do how to desk a desk process, right? I tell the dealer, hey, this is the process we train. And I go through all of them, make sure that, we're in alignment, with before I do it and then after I do it. Then I'll start holding them accountable to how they're actually desking the deals. That's another thing with technology, through Stone Eagle, through, Darwin Means or whatever you're using, I can go in and really see how the deals are going down. Well, if I call a dealer and say, hey, man, I trained Jacob on blah, 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 we agreed that this is how it's going to be done. It's not being done. And if they don't hold them accountable, then what have we done? We wasted a bunch of time and really nothing's getting done. But more than anything, you're not servicing the customers. It's just bad all the way around. So accountability is the huge component to training, regardless of what it is, whether it's sales, F&I, service, or whatever. So that's one thing I would tell every dealer: hold people accountable.
So step one, do it. Step two, check in on what you've done. Yeah. So let's just kind of talk realistically here, right? So if they're not able to maybe contract a company like you, they want to try to do something themselves. Maybe they've got a tenured F&I manager, or they got a GM that was just promoted from F&I, that whole path where people get promoted from the sales to the F&I to GSM, GM. What can somebody do to train that replacement ahead of time? I mean, what are the steps they got to take? Sit down with them, show them what they've done, or is there an actual guide that they should be pulling up writing?
That's actually a great question. Because here's what happens is if I'm working in a store, right, and they advance me to the next position, so the guy's coming up, if I train him how I was trained, right, then I move up again. This guy, he's going to keep passing that trend down. Well, it all starts with the first guy. If he doesn't know the proper way to do it, well, what does he teach? He teaches them proper way down, and it just keeps going down. Whoever you do business with, you're going to have an F&I company, because you're doing the service contracts, what have you. Make sure that they should be able to come in and deliver that training for you. And I'm not knocking on any other companies. That's not my place. We all do business we feel comfortable with, but that type of stuff is what I just call table stakes. That's part of what we do. Any F&I company should be able to come in and deliver that level of training and communicate it out. And if they can't, then if I was the owner, I think I'd probably take a look out there at it, who I'm doing business with, just being realistic to your point, being transparent. That comes with the territory now on our side. You got to be able to do that. But when it comes to talking about F&I doesn't start when the customer agrees to buy the vehicle. or bike or whatever. F&I starts when they come into, your Kawasaki dealership from, hey, welcome to ABC Kawasaki. That's when F&I starts, is at that point. And it's got to be a culture within the store. And, sales process, everything's got to be dialed in so it all works, together. And that's another, I think, a big mistake that a lot of dealers make is they don't approach it that way. So I think they don't lose the sales. They lose gross from the front, gross from the back. I was just gross all the way around.
So from the F&I manager's point of view, something that always worked in my past experiences, they would always introduce themselves into maybe the sit down phase, right? If you're familiar with the Ed Lemko 10-step, right? You agree, and then you're to the sit down, right? You're discussing the terms of the deal that's about to go down. That's usually when the F&I manager would come over, say, hi, I'm this guy. And what are we looking at today? He would almost be the pre-closer to the deal, so that by the time you walk into the F&I box, it's not a new introduction. You've already met this guy about 30 minutes ago when they were discussing the write-up, right?
Right.
So that's something that has always worked for us and my past experience. I mean, what other types of ways F&I managers?
That's the way to do it, and, so many F&I guys will wait for the customer to, y'all want to buy and they come in, and that's just, 20 plus years ago, that's how we were doing it. It was okay. But you have two problems with this. Okay. And that scenario, first of all, I think if you ask your salespeople, ask any salesperson you have, hey, what do you think happens when John Doe agrees to buy and he gets an F&I? What do you think happens to that F&I office? And most of them have no clue. So they're thinking that they're just, customers in there getting beat up, what have you. Yeah. So I would make, first of all, that they understand, hey, you're cool, man. Introducing the people, into F&I. The second is the F&I guy has got to meet beforehand. If not, the customer is fully expecting to get the hell beat out of them when they walk into a finance office, right? So you got to clear those two hurdles with the salesperson and with the customer. That customer, I call it early management intervention, is absolutely key. And, that's where you're really going to set up for all of your menu. If not menu selling, then I'd probably take a look at that. But that's easy. You know what, Jake? See that you're looking at whatever. Appreciate you coming to give us the opportunity. Just out of curiosity, you're going to keep us for a while. You're going to ride it. How many miles you're going to ride it? You just have to ask them questions.
Totally.
Because the most powerful words of sales is "you told me," right? Mm-hmm. So if I get somebody to finance, or if I'm just showing them a bike, you know what, you told me you're going to ride it on weekends this way. You told me that it's going to be for you and your son. You told me you wanted a side-by-side for farm work, and I want to get this information. So when I get to the menu and I'm actually presenting F&I products, as you told me, you're going to keep this long, this cover is going to cover you for the amount of time you told me to keep the vehicle. And you can't get that unless you do that introduction out front.
Okay.
But it's got a process for that as well.
Well, what other types of, I guess, points in the sales process do you often see F&I opportunities getting lost even before the customer gets into the F&I office?
I have seen so many, I'll try to make sure I've worded this correctly. I see so many seasoned salespeople literally talk customers out of buying a product and finance.
Okay.
And I cannot, if I had all the money from salespeople I know and I'll see do that, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now, man. I'd be.
Give us an example of that, Gene. What's that look like?
You know what? I'm just related to the car business. You know what? He's going to offer you some of this tire and wheel stuff. Our roads here are actually pretty good. You're not going to need that stuff. I've heard that so many times, and it relates in the auto, power sports. It relates all the way around. And dealers like to think that they have a control or handle on how this process takes place. But I'm telling you, 99% of them really don't understand what takes place at that ground level, because that's why you have sales managers, right? So if I'm not holding a sales manager accountable to do it, he's not holding the people accountable to do it. What level of accountability do you have?
That makes a lot of sense. Is that a training issue, or is that more structural?
That's a complete training issue. That's a complete training issue. But, that being said, you have to ask yourself, what is your sales process? Where does it start and how does it flow? And if you have just the guy's looking at, this gold wing, that's, just showing the bike and that's it, then, What are you? You're just selling. That's a transactional sale. It's not a relationship sale. And what I've noticed and really watched the trend of this, we are getting back. COVID was all transactional. It wasn't hard to sell anything during COVID. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
We're through that now. We can't even say COVID anymore. Now we're back to the relationship side of selling. So what's happened is the guys and girls that came in during COVID were never taught the relationship side of selling. So you almost have to go back in and, I don't say reinvent, but you almost have to reinvent your training to go back to the beginnings, which is that relationship side of selling.
Well, I mean, you've been very vocal about training, and you say that it's a full store responsibility, not just an F&I and not just the management, but like, what should GMs be watching for to know if they have a good or bad process problem?
Well, they should. Well, I would say they should know, but most GMs managed by spreadsheet, okay, especially in a larger store, which I understand that. So they just manage, John Doe's write-ups are down, whatever it is. So they can only manage by that. Well, they're not really out there saying, well, why are the write-ups down? How many, if you come from BDC world, you know this. How many leads did they have? How many appointments did they make? How many actually showed, just from that side of it? Other ones that showed how many, demonstrations did we get? How many write-ups did we get? That's how most GMs manage that process, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is this: once you start seeing a guy fall off, what do we do? You know what? That guy's not getting it done. Let's, get rid of him. Let's get somebody else in. Well, that's not fair to that guy, because I'm a believer. You have to ask yourself, have I done everything possible to train this guy how to do the job at the most effective way? And if I can't say 100% that I have, that's a failure on our part, right? So to answer your question, though, the way the GM can monitor it is actually have somebody role play it with them rather than managing by spreadsheet. Get on the desk and watch how the process goes down. Actually pick up the phone after a customer buys or doesn't buy. Hey, I just followed up. You see that you bought a vehicle from us. Just wanted to, see how the process was. Or more importantly, I see that you did not buy from us. And go through the process, where you offered a test drive. And you can do this conversationally and actually find out where the breakdown in it is. And you may find that it is actually in the sales manager not holding the salesperson accountable to that process as well, So again, it starts at the top and goes down. You can't blame everything on the salesperson if the sales manager isn't holding accountable. You can't blame anybody if you don't have a training process in place to make sure that they understand what to do, what their job is.
So you're almost saying that one of the managers or GM even would do almost a post-visit survey with them over the phone to see how their visit went.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
No, there's good business. You should do that. Just do the same as service, That should not change whether it's
a lot of phone calls. A lot of heaters, a lot of phone calls. I'm sure GMs are kind of rolling their eyes right now. Hey, man, I ain't got time for that.
Well, let me ask you a question. And that's a great point because I had this conversation last week. Just that conversation. But I don't know if I have, don't have time to do that. Well, let me ask you a question. You're losing money. Your profit margins are shrinking. Mm-hmm. You're selling 30% less vehicles. What do you not have time for? You're doing less business. How do you not have time? That's stuff like that's what you need to have time for. You need to stop the shrinking. You need to stop the business from, going down. So how do you do it? You got to get involved, And again, I've been a GM over multiple stores. I did this every single day. You got to do it. And I don't know better than anybody else, but I'm actually probably the worst of any GM that's listened to this thing. But that's basic 101 stuff. You've got to pick up the phone. And I'm not saying you got to call every customer. You need to call at least half of them, though. Yeah, just that's the only way that you're going to get a true reading on how the business is.
I like that, or at least the ones that don't buy. You're looking at your financials.
That don't buy. Yeah, at least ones that don't buy.
Okay, I'm sure you have some sort of script that you can maybe provide GMs. Hey, here's how I would open the call or ask these questions on why they didn't buy these particular services from my dealer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, don't expect every call to be, I just didn't, like price, whatever. People typically buy when value exceeds cost. So if somebody doesn't buy, either they just didn't see the value to justify the cost of it.
Right.
Right. That's number step one. Or step two is the salesperson, sales manager, whoever never built the value either in the product, which is the easiest thing to build value in. The harder thing to build value in is the store. So there's a lot of competition out there. So what separates you from the net store up the street? You got to build value in your store to do that. And a lot of guys like, yeah, whatever, we know to do that, but they don't do it. They just, another thing I would do is secret shop your other stores, the other stores in the area, and see how they do it. And that's just another great way to get a gauge, from what's happening, what's being done.
Yeah, that's a good point. Secret shopping is always something that I think goes on pretty frequently, but I don't know of a case where you can secret shop an F&I process, can you?
Yeah, you can call. You could, I'm looking about service contract for, whatever, and just see, how they respond, how they come back with you. Do they just start pricing you? Do they tell you the different coverages? Exactly what do they talk about? Do they talk about the value, of it? If you say, hey, I'm looking to buy a maintenance plan for my my Indian, that's a big thing, on the Indians, Harleys, what have you, or all of them really. But I'm looking to buy one on my Indian. And I secret shopped a few dealerships. Number one, they didn't have any idea of the true thing, of the true product. First of all. Secondly, I had to leave messages and nobody ever called me back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just not good, on either front. Secret shop your own stores too, though, or have somebody do it. Oh, I do this weekly, man. I'm just like, you know what, Mr. John Doe dealer, I hate to even tell you this, but I talked to this person about this conversation and they never called me back.
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of business out there to be gotten. And I'm not, the one that beats up on stores because, again, we all going 1,000 miles an hour. But what is our job? What's our business? Our business is to provide good service to customers. So if we're not doing that, then you can't be that friggin' busy.
And build value. Yeah, for sure.
And build value. It's all about the value.
Yeah. As my good friend Nate Sonnell at National Powersports Dealer would say, people would understand the cost of everything and the value of nothing. But that's only if you don't pitch these types of services in the right kind of way.
Right. But where does it start? It starts with welcome to ABC Honda or whatever, and building that value, first of all, in the actual store. There's a reason they came there, right? Now, they could have come because you advertise lowest price on a vehicle or whatever, that could be the reason. But why did they stay? Why did they do business? At some point, you got to sell the fact that your store is the best store to do business at, right? So they're going to have to say, yeah, I want to do business on this vehicle at that store. And it's got to be, in that order. And there's some really, really, really good power sport dealers out there, man, like really good ones. But there's a lot that aren't. Yeah. So it's always refreshing to me to go and see the ones that are doing well. And the ones that are doing well all have something in common, though. It's actually funny. And I don't mean to run off on tangents, but the ones that are doing very well will all tell you, you know what? I think we can do better. I believe we can train better. I think that we can do better. I think, we can do better. And I've been to those that I'm thinking, man, you have a lot that you could do. And the conversation is 180. It's wild. It's odd to me to see, but
they're never satisfied.
Never satisfied. But the bigger issue is I think you have to be open and open-minded to what you are not doing well or what you're not doing right. And ego is the thing that kills all of us. There's very few that have bigger egos than I have, but you got to strip that ego out whenever it comes to doing business and realize, hey, you know what? Maybe there's an easier way to do it. Maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe there's a more effective way to do it. Maybe there's a more profitable way to do it, and just see how other people do it. Be open-minded to receiving, be open-minded to receive that information, whether it's positive, negative, or what have you. You've got to be open-minded to it.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. You've worked across automotive, you worked across power sports. What would you say in your experience are some of the key differences that dealers need to understand about the F&I process or the sales process in a power sports store compared to automotive?
It's actually very, very similar. And as much as F&I companies on a power sports store would like to say that it's, way different, and there are differences and nuances in them. There's no doubt about that. But structurally and through a process-wise, they're really about the same.
Okay.
Person agrees to buy a Camry, or they agree to buy a Goldwing. What have they done? Values exceeded cost. They've agreed to buy the vehicle from you, right? You need to have the early management intervention. F&I managers got to come out. You have to talk to them. There's different questions that you ask, but all you're doing on either one is setting up the menu. So what you don't want to do, and this is something I train weekly, most F&I guys, I was as guilty as anybody, have products that they are comfortable selling. So what do they end up doing? They'll sell a 4-year, 75,000 mile service contract on everybody. Well, for the person that's going to keep it 10 years, is going to drive the shit out of it, they don't really see value in that coverage, right?
Right.
That's why you got to have that. So when I actually structure the menu to do it, I want to sell to what the customers told me. As you told me, you're going to keep it this long. You told me you're going to ride this much. This is going to cover you amount of time you told me you'll keep the vehicle. As you told me, whatever it is, you live on a dirt road, so tire and wheel, and it just basically you sell to what the customer is telling you is either important to them or their driving patterns. That makes sense?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Let me ask more about the menu, just because you mentioned it a couple of times. It's obviously a very topical point, the menu, right? And dealers kind of have their own unique twist to it. But are you more of a fan of like a digital menu that we're seeing a lot more, with the technology and, hey, let me slide this thing around and kind of flip through some slideshows on a menu, digitally? Or do you like the paper? Let me slide it in front of you and we're writing the ink on the desk.
The one I like is the one that somebody will use every time. And I don't think, and I don't play the answer there. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Again,
Okay.
I've seen dozens of F&I sales processors trained. Okay. And company I worked with for a couple of years, I trained with, I traveled with attorneys for 2 years doing compliance audits, compliance meetings, training, blah, blah, blah. And one thing I learned from attorneys is this: any process you do is going to be legally compliant if you do it every single time without variation. Doesn't matter what it is. And it's the same principles that if you're going to do a digital menu, use a digital menu every single time, but it's all in the presentation. The only issue I see with digital menus, a lot of times you really have to control that conversation, because if I flip around a digital menu, a lot of times the people will tend to go straight to, if you have a base payment or whatever, they'll go straight to that payment. So now you're going through. So you just really have to control that entire process, and keep customers on point. Does that make sense? So if customer says, I don't just want to do that, Mr. Customer, it's your right, my responsibility to listen to everything available to you. Give us a few minutes, I'm going to go through these products with you, and then just take control of the customer and just start going down them again.
So you don't really see one working more than the other. You just want to have a little bit more control of the digital process. Okay.
Right.
So let me.
And I like the digital menus personally better.
Okay.
I think they're cleaner. I think from a compliance, perspective, it's easier to make sure that the stuff is being done right every time.
Yep.
Paper menus tend to get a little sloppy, unfortunately. Just call it what it is. Like, I write like absolute crap. So if I'm writing on a piece of paper, they're not going to know what I'm saying anyway. So, but I like the digital menus.
Okay. Follow-up question to that. I've seen some different types of menus in my experience. I'm sure you have too. Are you more of a fan of, say, an itemized list, or do you like the, gold, platinum, diamond package, 1, 2, 3 type scenario? Good, better, best.
The bigger question comes up from, do you want a 3 or 4 column menu, or do you like a 2 column, menu?
Okay.
And that really is just up to the F&I manager, or more important, the dealer, how he wants to present it out. I don't think there's a good or a bad either way personally. There's just, well, let me back up. Let me do a caveat that there's not a good or a bad either way, as long as everything's being disclosed properly. The compliance issue comes up. I just ran into this in the store where they'll say, hey, you know what, your payment on this is $795 a month. And don't say anything else.
Yeah.
It's just even though it includes service contract, blah, blah, yeah, it includes that, yeah. You got to make sure that you disclose everything that's in that payment. If not, you're outside of, the legal compliance as you disclose. There's just a plethora of issues. Not only that, you want to talk about creating bad customer experience.
Yeah.
That is the way to do it. I'm a believer in selling what you're actually selling, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Not just, jamming the stuff in there and going. But again, that's what we do. On our side of the business, you have got to have somebody that's in there training your people, have to actually sell the products specifically to that customer.
And you haven't seen one method or another close more customers smoother.
I have not. I mean, and again, I've done it. When I first learned F&I, we were doing what they call the advanced equity, because that's probably way before your date. And that's one, it was crazy actually. And it was, say guys looking at a Camry or whatever. I got great news for you. Today your payments are only $1,395 a month. That doing the first of the 15th. And that's the old mentality. Then you peel them off the cylinder. Well, that is advanced equity. So that's just for 24 months. And then just start working the months out. And basically all you're doing is just grinding the customers down to the point that they're like, I give, and just sign. And then you tell them what's in it. That is the absolute worst way to do it. And when I actually learned a menu process, I could kick myself in the tail for having done it that way for as long as we did it. The menu is just much easier. It's much more compliant. You have a lot less customers, they're mad at coming back at you. And you chargebacks go down. It's just a way to do it, honestly. If you're not doing it that way, then you're missing the boat, honestly. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Last follow-up to that whole scenario there, right? Digital menu or paper, 2-column, 3-column, whatever you're using, right? What's the best type of scenario for presenting the menu in the beginning? Is it out on the showroom table where they're doing the write-up, or is it, let me lock you in my F&I office and we're going to sweat it out for the next hour while I try to put products on top of this menu and have you buy them?
Well, I've seen the scenario where it's done in the F&I office work, in my opinion, better. But I've seen some stores, a lot of powersports stores especially, very effective presenting it as soon as the customer agrees to buy the vehicle.
At the table.
Yeah. Me personally, I like to do it in an F&I office because, out on the floor, especially if you're a bigger store, you just got so much going on that it's hard to keep the customer focused.
Sure.
So I guess it depends on how busy your store is, what's the volume, how active is it, where's the desk in relation to service, in relation to, other stuff going on. I just want to make sure that you have the customer focused on what you're trying to do. If not, if the customer can't hear, like I'm deaf as shit. If I can't hear somebody, I'm just like, man, I'm good. Not because I don't want to hear what they're saying. It's just because I can't hear what they're saying. Whereas if I'm in an office, I'm able to focus. And as a F&I manager, I'm able to read, the body language, facial expressions to be able to walk them, through it. But whichever way works best, for you, again, whoever you're doing business with, like on my end, should be able to adjust either way and train either way. I've done it every way imaginable, brother, and I've trained it every way imaginable. And I've seen it work great in a lot of places, and I've seen it struggle in a lot of places. So it comes down though to the basics. Basics is people, training, accountability. That's where it all. You can have whatever the presentation is. It can be all over the place, but if it's not trained properly, it's not going to matter.
Yeah. Maybe a little hybrid, a little introduction at the table and then signing the paperwork in the office and just kind of closing up a few of those loose ends, those details. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, I mean, you've worked on everything from the NCFC to the CFC to dealer-owned warranty companies. What do you think is still misunderstood about reinsurance in most powersports dealers?
Well, that's actually a very good question. And the thing that I think is most misunderstood is that they can actually do it. I still talk to, powersports dealers, excuse me. I talk to powersports dealers every week that are either doing a direct write or doing some sort of retro. And again, all these positions are good positions. It just depends on where that dealer is at that point. Where they're at now, where they want to go in 5 years, 10 years, what's their growth strategy. And that really is what's going to dictate, in my opinion, which direction they could go. But
Okay.
they need to understand that there are some reinsurance options available to them. The DOWC is a very unique structure, and really in my opinion, to go into that, you got to be doing a lot of business to make it, work out worthwhile, from the tax advantages. People like the idea of, I got my own company, that's why they'll do a DOWC. We see that a lot, but the accounting on that, you got to be doing big business. CFCs is a way that, almost everybody would go, in my opinion, in a power sports realm.
Okay.
But just, whoever you're doing business with, every year, have them come in. And if you haven't done it, have them do it now. So, hey, show me every structure that's available to me with you, side-by-side comparison, for the next 5 years, 10 years, and let's see how that looks and runs out. If they are in a reinsurance position, which is another thing that comes up, if they see their losses are creeping up, I would have a loss run by model for the last 12 months. Don't get sucked into your inception to date losses are X. What really matters is your last 12-month losses are where they're at. And if you see a model that's creeping up, whatever, have them just adjust the reserves on that particular model, so that it's in line and makes sense. If that makes sense.
It does. I should ask this earlier, but let's just, because we're on the podcast here, right? We have all sorts of people listening. Just give me a broad definition. What is reinsurance?
Reinsurance, the easiest way to think about it is this. So if you do a 5-year service contract, right, and let's say that the cost on it is $1,200. So you take that $1,200, you got an admin fee, administration fee for the warranty company.
Okay.
It's just easy math. Say it's $200. So you take $1,000, right? So that $1,000 goes into, for lack of a better term, a bank account. And let's say that within the 5 years, whatever, you have $500 worth of losses. So now you got $500 less that stays in that account that actually earns out. So you have earned, you have unearned reserve. And it earns out over time, depending if it's new or pre-owned, and depending on the term, is how quick it will earn out. But after it earns out completely, it stays in that bank account. Now, from there, you have different options, how you invest it. And there's a whole bunch of different ways, that you can go with that. But what most people do is they'll take it, they'll invest it, whatever they're comfortable investing, whatever, their financial advisors tell them to. It just stays in there and just grows and grows and grows and grows. Well, you don't really, the difference in that and just taking money up front is the difference in capital gains tax or ordinary income. So if you're doing a reinsurance or CFC, you decide, I want to buy a new store. You have a lot of options. You can borrow against, you do whatever, but let's say you just want to take all your money out. So when you take it out, you basically just pay capital gains when you repatriate it. And the only thing you're paying ordinary income on is going to be the money that you make investment income. But it's just a great way to do it. And the better they build these vehicles, it's just a no-brainer, honestly.
And you mentioned that dealer would use them for losses. What is an example of some losses for a dealer that they would use this money for?
If they have, let's say you got $1,000, you have a modular or something go out, and it's a $500 repair. Whatever the service repair is, they will consider that, a loss on that policy.
So the actual repair of the vehicle that you're insuring.
After repair of the vehicle. Okay. Again, you look at that too, if you have that particular vehicle that, if you're going to be in a reinsurance, be committed to it. So let's say with that particular scenario, engine blows, the engine's, whatever, $3,000, right? So now you obviously are the deficit on that. That's why you got to continuously feed what I call feed of the monster. And that's the law of big numbers. So if you do 50 of those particular contracts, and then you have an engine loss. No, it's just part of doing business.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if the factory set their service or their factory warranties at whatever, there's a reason why they set them at whatever. And it's not because they're that nice. It's because they understand that right after that is when you start really having issues where your claims are going to start, increasing, going up.
Right.
But have your F&I company run a performa with everything they have available, and have them run your last 12-month losses and where it's at by model, which is very, very, very important.
And do you see some models getting more losses than others?
Sure, you absolutely you're going to see that. In the auto industry, we see it, probably a little easier than but there's just so many different models in the power sports. Especially I'll go into a dealership in the Falls Church, and they got 7 different makes. You figure how many different models under one rooftop, and then you start, you put that into a reinsurance position. Now you just starts growing. The autos is much easier because you have Toyotas. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, it's really important for power sport dealers to look at it, break it out by make and by model. But again, your F&I company can run that quick.
And what are you typically seeing with those? What types of models are kind of hitting hard, I guess, on that losses statement?
That's all over the place. So that's a hard question to ask without
nothing stands out to you.
No, well, I see it across the board. I mean, again, it depends on the dealer, how they recondition their vehicles, especially pre-owned, before they put them out there. How is their service department on actually processing, calling claims, things in? Are they overestimate the claims and getting more approved than they should? Again, man, it's all over the place. And that's something that I do. I will go, if I see a dealer really start running really high 90-day losses, it's typically because they're reconditioning their inventory, whether it's, power sports or auto, on their service contracts. So I go and I put a stop to that pretty quick, so they have a reconditioning issue before they put it, stuff on the lot. That's a big issue. But there's nothing I can't say, hey, you know what, you need to look at, the 550 or whatever. It's across the board. Depends on the dealer. Region plays a big factor in it, obviously geography. If you're doing snowmobiles, obviously you're going to have probably a little higher losses than you would in other areas. It's just all over the place, really. Like where you're at, tends to probably run a little higher loss just because it's so damn hot in the summer, and people, it's just a fact, bro. You're out there, you're running the piss out of things, and
yeah,
every time I've had an issue on a motorcycle ride across country, it was always in Arizona or along Let's go. Just from that heat. Oh, from the heat, man. That heat just heat wreaks havoc, man, on air-cooled engines, especially.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Well, just last question on the reinsurance thing. If I'm a dealer that doesn't have it, or I'm a dealer with a couple rooftops, I mean, how should I think about whether reinsurance is right for me, and like what structure does it actually fit the best in?
Well, CFC, if you're going to reinsure, CFC is going to be the way, that 99% of power sport stores are going to look at it. Okay. And again, I would have whoever your F&I company is, or call me, I'll do it, and not even ask for business, it's just so you can see it. But have them run that performer for you. Okay. So that you can look at it. A lot of dealers are risk adverse. They just don't want to, their mind be on the hook, for whatever. So they don't want to do reinsurance. See if they have a retro type program. What a retro will do is it'll give you the benefits of the reinsurance, but it'll go up to like probably 90% is how we do it. But anyway, we just take 10% and we absorb all the risk. So then whatever the reinsurance profit would be, then we'll just put that back or send that back to the dealer, less that 10%. And that way the dealer's not on the hook, and they're still benefiting, from that reinsurance, type methodology. But again, just take a look at it, man. Let me tell you, power sport dealers are some of the most resilient entrepreneurs, period, in the country. It doesn't make shit what the business is. If you're a power sports dealer, the stuff that you've had to deal with, and you're still here, those guys, they know the deal. They're smart enough to look at it and weigh it out. They just need to have the stuff in front of them to weigh out. So get with your company. If you're not reinsuring it, it's not going to hurt anything to look at it. Just have them run you a reinsurance performer and just take a look at it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to double click on something we kind of talked about in the beginning of this phone call with some embezzlement, right? You had one of your recent posts hit kind of hard, right? I read most of your stuff. Internal theft, right? Operational leaks and silent profit loss. So internal theft doesn't always come from where you expected, right? You listed some specific steps that, a lot of dealers probably should be taken, but they're not, to audit their own operation. What are some of those steps, and what are some of the silent leaks that you see often in dealership finance and back-end ops?
Well, a lot of times what I will see is, and again, as I ran stores, I looked at everything that we paid out, every bill. And a lot of times it's the smaller bills where you'll end up seeing stuff getting siphoned off, too. So as a dealer, and again, you get a big dealer, they're going to not feel like they have time to do it, but you almost need to, as a dealer, sit down. And even if it's, I'll say sporadic, but just here and there, just, take stuff and check it, just where's the bill? Suddenly we're paying $5,000 a month for freaking coffee, and it should be, $300 a month. Obviously there's stuff in there. How does the deposits, how are the deposits looking when you reconcile them out? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of ways, that you can have monies taken from you. And I've seen almost every single one of them, from $5,000 a month coffee bills to money being paid to payoffs that really weren't, payoffs, to canceling F&I products, and the girl at the bank actually cashing the check that was given. Anyway, I've seen it all, brother. And the only way that you can do that is by true reconciliation of every penny that's going out. Because honestly, where we're at right now, we need to make sure we monitor every single penny that's going out. And it doesn't matter from where, for what end that it's going out at. Fortunately, we have a lot of very honest, CFOs and office, managers, whatever. But any good CFO, any good office manager is going to want you to double check them as well. Because one thing that you never want as a CFO, office manager, what have you, is somebody to say, you know what, I wonder if they've been 100%. So again, it's not to question anybody's integrity, loyalty, whatever. It's just good friggin' business practice, honestly, to do it that way.
And when you say reconcile, and when you talk about questioning your office manager, your CFO, I mean, are you doing this quarterly, monthly? What's the kind of time frame? Monthly.
I do it. I did it monthly.
Monthly. Got it. So you have.
And brother, I ran a 300 unit a month dealerships and did it monthly. Is it work? Absolutely. But you know what? It was my money that I looked at, And the most important thing, and I ask this for a lot of dealers, especially a lot of young dealers, what's most important to you, net profit or cash flow? And, the ones that get it will always say cash flow. Well, if cash flow is what's most important to you, what's the one thing that you should be focusing on the most? Cash flow, And so that's the reason why you really want to make sure that you're checking every friggin' penny, every entry, every, credit, debit, just check everything. And honestly, now though, with technology, it's so easy. Look, you can write an AI, you can have AI do a program now and just say, tell me what's jumping out as too much payout or call, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Those AI programs now, they'll pop it out to you where this looks unusual, this is low. So then you just target and just look at that. I mean, technology is a beautiful thing, brother. We're just not utilizing it on that end as much as we should.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's all for what we do and what, we're having a conversation here for, but I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with anybody. I'm a big fan of AI and what it can do for you, especially in that realm, in that world.
Well, let's go down that road a little bit more. What exactly are you feeding the AI? A P&L statement, a bank statement? What is it?
You can take whatever. You can take it, and I would feed it a bank statement, just so I can look for irregularities of, within the statement, and it can that quick.
Yeah.
You can feed the P&L, you can feed whatever you want in there, or you can put all of it in there. So, hey, here's a profit and loss statement. Here's the, the bank statement, whatever, that you want to put in there. Here's my dealer statement, factory statement. Look for irregularities, and it'll do it in about 2 minutes. where it would take most guys or ladies freaking hours to go through and even pick up a tenth of that. Again, we have this technology out there, Jake. Why we would not want to use it, I don't know. I use it every day, honestly. I will feed in my dealerships, have 20 F9 managers tell me who's up, who's down, rather than going through, 1,000 freaking reports.
Yeah.
I just feed it in there. It spits it out that quick. So now I can target, my training where I'm going and focusing on. So it's the same in the dealership world. Just use that AI. But if you're not, you've got to go and look at every day, look at statements, statements, bank statements. If you look at, your P&L, you can be able to pick up if you're, you'll be able to pick up pretty quick if something's off. Is your coffee too high? Are they ordering too many spark plugs? Are they, suddenly do you see, a big surge in cleaning supplies, in the detail shops? And, these are things that most people don't think to look at, but you got to think to look at it. And I'm not saying there are some unscrupulous vendors out there that will pay employees, to order certain things or do certain things, but it's the real world. There are, you have to be conscious of that. And I would hate to see that happen. But unfortunately, I've had it happen to me. Anybody that's listened to this that has any leadership position has had it happen to them, whether they know it or they don't. The key is just to hedge yourself. And once, people know that you're looking at everything, that stuff will organically just start coming down anyway. Because they know, most people know, hey, they're going to be looking at it. So, they don't have that temptation.
Yeah. You inspect what you expect, right?
Yeah. Remove the temptation. It's like Reagan says, you trust but verify.
Trust but verify. I like that. You got a lot of sayers.
That was Reagan's go-to.
I like a lot of your sayings. You said earlier, you can be green and grow or ripe and rotten. I like that one too.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk more about the people, right? So this is a very, very much a people business, power sports and automotive for that matter. But for our purposes, we're talking about motorcycle and power sports.
You froze on me there for a second, brother. Say that again.
Oh, well, I was going to say that we want to talk about people, right? So we're very much a people business in this industry. When you talk about process, what role does a clean, coachable salesperson take, and more specifically, how do we retain that top talent today? Just coming out of the COVID era, like you were talking, most of them were order takers and not really, trained up, really high rock star people. How do we keep the retained talent that we have right now?
Well, that's a very, very good question, because typically what happens is this. We have 10 salespeople at, ABC Honda, right? And a couple leave. Most of the time, majority of the time, we need to hire two bodies. We need to hire two people. Just hire two of the best people, but we'll hire two people, right? What ends up happening, they hire probably the first two or three people that come in, not necessarily meaning that they were the best or they're, who we should have. I'm a real big believer in quality, not quantity, right? Okay. So what I do, I would interview somebody and I'd go through this process with them. I'm a big believer in personality indexes, disc profiles, but whatever you want to use. And I actually do that profile so you can see how to manage them, and where they're at. But I never would offer anybody a job the first go around. I would have them call me for the second interview. This is just stuff I did, right? I'd have them call me for the second interview. If they're calling me back and following up with me, the likelihood of them following up with customers is going to be much higher. And it shows a willingness that they actually want to come to work. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is just hiring somebody and not really trying to figure out, do they actually want to come to work for me, or are they just looking for a job? Yeah, because if they're looking for a job, and I tell guys all the time, and the girls, look, if you're looking for a job, that's cool. We can get you a job. You can get a job, anywhere. Or you're looking for a job or career, because that's
right.
Two different paths, that we need to go down. So, index in some way, whether it be, DISC. There's 1,000 different personality profile, test scores out there. And really make sure that they want to come to work, and not just come to work to get a paycheck. They want to come to work because they want to learn, make it a career. if that makes sense. Another big thing that I'm a big believer in, especially as it relates to F&I, and the F&I guys that are going to watch this are going to probably shoot me later for saying this, but typically if I'm hiring an F&I manager, I want somebody that has never really done anything to do with F&I. If they sold for a little bit, that's cool. But if somebody sold cars or bikes for a long time, they have a preconceived notion of how it should be. The best F&I managers that I've ever trained have never been in any business ever. And what they're able to do, though, is understand a sales process and execute that process without having preconceived notions that, this type of buyer doesn't buy tire and wheel. They just present every product, every customer, every time, not knowing that the customer should not buy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know I went off a tangent there, a good bit, but hiring people is definitely it's a different process now. But don't hire somebody just to hire somebody. If they're not the right person, if you have any doubt, then don't hire them. You can take them through all the different processes and all different, hiring interviews, and we're going to have 25 people interview you and what have you. But if they're not the right person, want a career with it, then don't. Another thing I would do, just saying that, if you have multiple interviews and have the hiring department or hiring team, whatever, get together, and if anybody says, no, I just don't know, then don't hire them. Because you're hiring a family member is how I look at it. You're not just hiring a body. So if you have a sales manager that doesn't necessarily like, Jane Doe, then maybe, maybe there's something there that you really probably shouldn't hire them. Yeah. But once you hire them,
well, that's on the hiring side, but that's what I was going to ask, right? Yeah. So beyond the hiring, right, which is all great advice. Thank you. But let's say you've got a good group of guys right now or gals, and they are performing. How do you keep the retention on those top talents right now?
You got to continuously, trainers can't be a one-time event. Training has got to be a weekly event. First of all. Secondly, I'm a big believer in doing one-on-ones with people. And matter of fact, I read an article the other day that this particular guy didn't believe in them. I believe in them. This is the reason why. One of the biggest reasons people leave is they are treated like just another number, right? So as I do one-on-ones with people, as we're laying out their day, we're talking about it, I like to say, hey, how's the family? How's, little Junior doing? What's going on? And I try to really relate and connect at a personal level. Because once people know that, hey, we're connected at a personal level, they tend to want to stay with you, much, much longer. But the one-on-ones can help you get through that. And we need to be able to help them actually provide a living for their family. Because, the old saying that people don't leave managers, they don't leave companies, leave managers is 100% fact. And if the managers aren't treating them with respect, then that's just a whole different thing. But, that's a real broad question. You have to look at not only, how are your benefits? Are your benefits geared toward longevity? Or are they just geared toward, hey, you're not doing 401ks, your insurance is shit, that's, again, that's just somebody that wants a job. If I could summarize it all up into the number one thing that I believe is going to make people stay when you hire them is to make them understand what their career path is. We do a horrible job of this. So if I hire a brand new salesperson in, right, I would tell them, hey, this is career path. You're going to sell for a year, right? And if you do these numbers, then the opportunity is going to be for you to go into finance. You're going to be financed for whatever, for another year. This is the expectation. Then it's this, then it's that, then it's that. That is your career path if you do these things. And I can tell you, if you ask 99.9% of the employees of any store, they will tell you that they have never been told what a career path is. And they got to understand that, hey, this is a career path. It's not just a sales position. And I never hire anybody, honestly. And I just had this conversation 3 days ago. I never hire anybody, just hire for that position. I hire them for the next position. And that's something we really need to consider. So if we're interviewing for a salesperson, would you develop and put that salesperson as your F&I manager? The F&I manager, you take that person and put him in your sales manager's role. You always got to think that way.
Right.
You know, you're hiring for the next position, honestly, more so than the current one. And we just don't do a good job with it. Yeah. That's how you build teams, brother. You know, another thing, I talk a lot about this is building a bench. You know, I think that one of the worst things that we do as an industries in both sides is actually hire people from the outside to come in and do a job that we may have somebody internally that can do it. So if you've got, 3 people on your sales staff that yeah, they're probably going to be able to do F&I, let's go ahead and just start training them how to do F&I, right then. And with understanding, hey, your job is to sell. We want to go ahead and train you here. So if the opportunity comes up, you're ready to go. Because there's nothing more motivating than promoting somebody from within. And there's very little as demotivating as bringing somebody from outside in that can't do the job that they could do. Again, I'm a big believer from promoting within. I don't know why you will. You know the people, they've been with you, they're obviously committed to you. Why would you not want to give them a chance to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
And any F&I company should be able to do that for you.
Well, Gene, you're a USMC veteran, Semper Fi, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you've got a theology degree.
Yes, sir.
As we're kind of rounding out the end of the conversation here, how do those disciplines show up in your day-to-day work with dealers?
That's a great question. I pray to God every day that I'm able to make an impact in people's lives. I was having this conversation Friday with podcast that we were talking about earlier. I stopped working for money years ago, and most people won't beat me in the head for saying that. Obviously, economics always comes into it, but what do I mean by that? I wake up every day and I just ask myself truly, who can I meet today? What can I do today to make a difference in this person's life? How can I make their life better? What can I do, to help them? And that's just how I get up, every single day. The Marine Corps gives me the discipline, to get up and do it, every single day. Doing jiu-jitsu as long as I have. One thing that I started doing jiu-jitsu out of the Marine Corps rather than taking, 8 different pills to live day to day. I just got into doing, jiu-jitsu. But what it taught me is this: you can only think of one thing at a time when you're doing jiu-jitsu. If not, you get shit choked out of you. So you end up on it being singular focus. And that helps me with this. So whenever I get up today and I start going, rather than, my mind going to, a million places, I just stay, singularly focused on whatever it is that I want to do that day until I get that task done and whatever. But again, the basics of me, honestly, is how can I make a difference in somebody's life today, and not financially, just an actual impact in someone's life.
I love that. Well said. And you always sign off most of your emails, your posts with keep grinding, keep growing, keep winning. But the last question I want to ask you is, what does that mean to you when things aren't going your way?
Brother, you got to get up every single day and you got to continue the grind every day. It's something I tell my son all the time. I hate to use this term, but it's true. It's always about the hustle and the grind. And you can't grind 50% of the time and expect 100% of the results. It just doesn't work that way, right? So I'm always grinding, always moving forward, and we all have to be that way, because unfortunately the banks don't, let you get by with not paying your bills, every now and then. So we got to always be grinding. So if you get hit in the nose, you know what? You just get up and you keep grinding and moving forward. It's just it's the way life is. I mean, not just business, it's just life in general. You can't lay down. You got to always, too many people depend on me, bro, and I'm sure it's the same with you,
Yeah.
So you think about that. You think about in your life, people watching this in their lives. If you had a day where you're like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to do anything this week. How does that affect everybody around you? Not just your family, but like everybody that really depends on you to get up every day and be 100% you, right? So always get up and grind. Always move forward.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap. His name is Gene. He's the vice president of sales at Brightline Dealer Advisors. He's a badass, and he's here to help your dealership. So, Gene, how can people get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is the easiest way. Just feel free to pop on LinkedIn and message me. If not, you can always call me. My phone is literally on 24/7. The number is 826-253-3131. And just hit me up, text me, call me, and I'll be here to help whatever. Regardless, doing this podcast with you, I appreciate the opportunity. But if somebody has a question, something I can help them with, if they do business with me or not, that's of no relevance to me. If I can help somebody, I want to help them. So whether it's a reinsurance question, process, whatever, just give me a call.
Well, on that note, thank you, Gene, for coming on. A lot of information today, and I appreciate you. And good luck to you out there. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Bye, everybody.
Still guessing what to pay on a used bike? Still holding aged units that just won't move? It's time for a real system. Moto Hunt's ultimate used inventory playbook shows how the best dealers are finding better inventory, pricing trades right, and turning used bikes faster with fewer mistakes and more margin. It's short, real, and free to download right now. Visit dealers.motohunt.com to grab your copy or check for the link in the notes.